there's a way to make an entrance.
This is my destiny.
It was now a conspiracy of witches.
Download Veely today.
You're responsible parents, right? At home, you keep hazardous products out of the reach of the kids. Detergents, washing powder, cleaning products. But there is a chemical threat that you can't fight against. Pollutants that you can't see and that you can't smell, but to which our children are very exposed. Dangerous particles that are hidden in our food and in the water that we drink. Outside, our children inhale other chemical products. A staggering statistic. Every day, children can be exposed to around 130 chemical pollutants. In the great toxic game, will children always be on the losing side? Their brains and their bodies are developing. They are the most vulnerable when it comes to chemical products. Cancers, birth abnormalities, hormonal problems, mental impairments, and even autism. These very different pathologies could often be caused by the same thing. Across the world, doctors and scientists are sounding the alarm.
It's a chemical that has a lot of negative effects. It has potential to be very harmful to children.
Our population here probably have much higher incidence, about 10 times of the national rate.
Children should not be forced to give away some of their brain functions just because we enjoy some benefits from using pesticides.
Pesticides, the #1 suspect. In the great toxic game, our children always land on this square. We have taken samples of and analyzed the hair of 20 or so of these children across the world. Frankly, we were stunned by the results. On average, these children had 40 different pesticides present in their hair.
Vous, qui représentez justement les industriels des pesticides, est-ce que vous me maintenez ici qu'il n'y a aucun risque pour la santé de ces enfants?
Je pense qu'il n'y a pas de risque pour la... On peut pas certifier, on ne peut jamais certifier qu'il n'y a pas de risque.
The great toxic game has led us to 6 multinationals: Syngenta, Bayer, Monsanto, Dow, BASF, and DuPont. We call them the Big Six. They reign almost absolute over a colossal market that is worth 50 billion euros. We have tracked their compounds. Some of these dangerous compounds have intruded into our everyday environment. We will show you how children breathe in a pesticide from the air every day that is classified as a likely carcinogen. Its name is Folpet. It is one of the best sellers of the German giant Bayer.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Élise Lucet, je suis française, je viens de France. Je suis actionnaire de Bayer.
This is Nathan. Hey Nathan, nice to meet you. This is Martin.
We have also discovered that some pesticides could play a significant role in triggering autism. And autism itself is exploding amongst children throughout the world. Our investigation has led us as far as Hawaii. This paradise on Earth has become an open-air laboratory. It's the preferred playground of the agrochemical multinationals. In these fields, the firms test out their future products. To put an end to the massive usage of pesticides, the inhabitants have voted. But the manufacturers have counterattacked in the courts.
What do you think of the fact that a democratic process being, challenged by big companies like the one you represent, Dow, Genetics, or even Monsanto? What do you think?
As I mentioned in court, and as I think the question is, do the voters have the right to regulate in this area? We believe that they do.
So let's reveal to you how some chemical products from the multinationals put our children in danger. 1 year ago, our investigation began with a number. Number 97. According to the EFSA, the European Food and Safety Authority, 97% of food products contain residues of pesticides. It's impossible to avoid them. But in any case, why would we want to avoid them? According to the industry, they kill insects, they get rid of weeds, so they protect crops. They are a miracle solution. According to Syngenta, they're even good for the ground that our children play on. And for Monsanto, they ensure a good meal for our babies. And if you listen to Dow, they quite simply mean the end of world hunger. A miracle solution. And did you know that France is the promised land of pesticides? It's the biggest consumer of these products in Europe, and number 3 in the world. But exactly what products are they? And in what quantities are they used? After many long months of investigation, we have been able to get a hold of secret government figures on the usage of pesticides in France. Over 800,000 lines, an inventory of pesticide sales, product by product, category by category, and year by year. If we had to print it all, we would need more than 10 studios like this one. Our first finding, in France, on average, nearly 65,000 tons of pure pesticides are sold each year. In the top 10 of the best-selling products, names that smell sweetly of nature: glyphosate, mancozeb, Folpet. Further down are tetraconazole, phenoxycarb, and then some rather strange classifications: T, T+, CMR, pesticides that are classified as carcinogenic, toxic to reproduction, hormone disruptive, or neurotoxic. To better understand the impact of these products on people, and in particular on children, the best thing to do is to go to the places where they are most widely used. One department keeps coming up, with over 2,700 tons of pesticide sold there each year. It's one of the biggest consumers: the Gironde. Ah, the Gironde, the region of good wine, Bordeaux wine, the symbol of French excellence. Vineyards stretch as far as the eye can see, nature in its purest form. Well, kind of. That day, we have only just arrived amongst the Médoc vines. The odor of chemical products irritates the throat. These big machines are responsible, pesticide sprayers. They go over the field up to 18 times per plot and per season. We want to know what's being sprayed today.
Bonjour, monsieur. C'est quoi, c'est du soufre aujourd'hui, c'est quoi? Ouais.
C'est pas que je vous peux répondre à vos questions, parce que c'est un sujet qui est très sensible.
Sensible parce que quoi?
Parce que c'est un sujet sensible.
We try our luck at one of the neighboring plots.
Bonjour, monsieur. Qu'est-ce que vous... aujourd'hui, c'est quoi? C'est fongicide?
Oui.
Fongicide? C'est quoi, vous savez un peu comme molécule? Vous connaissez pas trop?
C'est des produits chimiques, tout est dangereux pour moi. Même des soufres, on vous dit c'est du soufre, mais c'est dangereux, il ne faut pas le toucher, il ne faut pas le sentir.
Vous avez des enfants, par exemple?
Oui.
Et qu'est-ce que vous leur dites quand il y a des épandages? Vous leur dites faites attention?
Non, moi, j'ai des enfants qui interdisent de travailler dans ce domaine.
Ah ouais?
Voilà.
And then, as we get in the car again, it feels more like we're in a nuclear zone than the Parker Guide of French wines. Full body protective clothing, sealed gloves, and breathing masks. To clean a crop sprayer, the farm workers take great precautions. It has to be said that the danger seems very real. As is also illustrated by this map of the Gironde prefecture, it is a map of sensitive sites, including elementary and high schools that are located close to crop spraying sites. 132 establishments are affected. Like this school. A few meters away from the yard are vines, as far as the eye can see. The building, with 100 or so children inside, is surrounded. To measure the exposure of the children from these schools, we suggest a little experiment to their parents. We will need some gloves and a pair of scissors. At the exits of those establishments located close to the vineyards, we take a lock of hair from the children. In total, we take hair samples of 20 children from 4 elementary schools, which are classed as sensitive due to the crop spraying that is carried out. Then we send the samples to a public laboratory in Luxembourg, to the European specialists in the analysis of pollutants found in hair.
L'avantage de l'analyse de cheveux, c'est qu'on couvre une période de temps beaucoup plus étendue que par une analyse d'urine ou de sang. Le cheveu n'est pas utilisé comme un capteur sur lequel ce qui tombe du ciel serait déposé et restera attaché. C'est bien le signe d'un passage de ces pesticides dans l'organisme des individus.
We get the results back. On average, these children have 44 pesticides in their hair, of which 24 are categorized in these red columns. Pesticides that are banned, but which are still present in the environment, or authorized pesticides that are classed as dangerous, carcinogenic compounds, toxic to reproduction, neurotoxic, mutagenic, hormone disruptive.
C'est un cocktail, ouais, ça c'est sûr.
Est-ce qu'il y a plus de risques pour ces enfants-là?
On sait que l'exposition à un cocktail de différents polluants, pesticides ou autres, peut avoir des effets à court terme ou à long terme, des fois transgénérationnels, sur les individus qui ont consommé.
In France, since 1980, childhood cancers have been increasing at a rate of 1% every year. 2,500 new cases each year. It's the second highest cause of infant mortality. In the Gironde, according to the National Register of Childhood Leukemia, a child's risk of developing a leukemia is 20% higher than the national average. Is there a link between these illnesses and exposure to pesticides? For French scientists, there is not a shadow of a doubt. In 2013, INSERM, the French Institute of Health and Medical Research, published an appraisal report on all of the scientific studies carried out on the impact of pesticides on health for the first time. In the long list of illnesses linked to pesticides, 2 catch our attention. 2 childhood cancers, brain tumors, and leukemias in children. So, inevitably, we ask the question, who is responsible for this heavy reliance on pesticides? The farmers? They themselves breathe in the products that they spray. They are victims too. We prefer to investigate those who are really the ones profiting from this, those who sell these dangerous pesticides, the agrochemical multinationals. Amongst the most widely used products in France, the name of one compound keeps cropping up: Folpet. It's classified as a likely carcinogen in the United States and as a suspected carcinogen in Europe. It is sold worldwide, and there is one multinational that is way out in front when it comes to sales of products made from Folpet. Bayer. Bayer, you've heard of them, right? The chemical giant, the inventor of aspirin. Over time, the company has diversified its activities. It produces medical equipment, plastic goods. It takes care of animals and, above all, it develops pesticides. Folpet is one of Bayer's best sellers. The stakes are pretty high. If you imagine, in terms of weight, the amount of Folpet sold each year in France is the equivalent of nearly 5 billion aspirin tablets. But if we take a closer look, Folpet can be found virtually everywhere in France, even in the air that we breathe. In 2015, the bodies responsible for measuring pesticides in the air found Folpet in over 15 of France's 22 regions. There is no danger of Bayer getting a slap on the wrist either, as there are no regulations that exist regarding the concentration of pesticides in the air. However, we still have a fair few questions to ask the German company, but we find it hard to get in touch with them. No one at Bayer seems to be available to answer our questions, so we need to play smart. And we've decided to go to the annual shareholders meeting that takes place in Cologne, Germany. It's forbidden to ask questions if you're not a shareholder. So we've bought some shares and we got dressed up for the occasion. Now we just have to get the cameras through. Mission complete. Despite the metal detectors and security men, we managed to get inside the building. The meeting begins. We split up so as not to raise suspicion. Maren Deckers, the MD of Bayer, opens the general meeting.
2014 war auch operativ ein sehr erfolgreiches Jahr. Der gesamte Konzern erzielte mit 42,2 Milliarden Euro eine neue...
With 11% growth and a turnover of 9.5 billion euros, the pesticides and seed sector of Bayer is this year's big winner by far.
Als die Erde vor 4 Milliarden Jahren endlich unter eine Temperatur durch maßgeschneidertes Saatgut mit ertragreichen und robusten Sorten sowie unserem Pflanzenschutzportfolio tragen wir einen wichtigen Teil zur Ernährung der steigenden Weltbevölkerung bei. Die Wissenschaft des Lebens verstehen, den Menschen zu dienen. Das ist Bayer.
Well, that all sounds great. We are still not allowed to film the meeting, so we've had to get out our trusty old camcorders. The questions follow, one after another, and we patiently await our turn. We've brought along an empty bag of Bayer's Folpet for the occasion, which is marked under the brand name Michael Flash. 6 hours after the meeting began, the room has emptied, somewhat, and it's finally our turn to ask our question about Folpet, the flagship pesticide sold by Bayer.
Hi, my name is Élise Lucet. I'm coming from France, and I'm a shareholder of Bayer. I'd like to know if I can ask a question in French or in English, please.
I'm sorry that I interrupt you, but I just told the audience that we have to talk here on the German shareholders meeting in German here. And you have to ask your question in German, or please make use of a translator.
I have my translator, so you will hear me in German. Wait a minute, please.
Well, we had seen that coming.
Herr Deckers, eine der Ursachen dieses Erfolges heißt Michael Flash. Michael Flash, wie Sie es natürlich wissen, ist ein Unkrautvernichtungsmittel, das Folpel enthält. Wie Ihnen auch bekannt ist, ist Folpel eine krebserregende Substanz. Über 3 Millionen Kilogramm, die in den Jahren 2008 bis 2013 nach Frankreich verkauft haben, besorgen. Fast allen französischen Regionen. Schauen Sie sich diese Karte an. Auch nicht nur in der Nähe von Feldern konnten wir Folpelspuren beobachten, sondern auch in Städten und Dörfern und sogar in der Nähe von Schulen. Folpel ist nicht das einzige Produkt, das sie nach Frankreich verkaufen. Genau 50 andere Produkte, die auch krebserregend sind, verkaufen sie. Produkte, die gefährlich sind für Embryos oder Genveränderungen verursachen. Ihren eigenen Worten zufolge hatte Bayer sich zum Ziel gesetzt, Krankheiten zu heilen und somit das Leben der Menschen zu verbessern. Sollten Sie nicht stattdessen versuchen, neue Krankheiten zu verhindern? Haben Sie vor, den Verkauf dieser Produkte nach Frankreich einzustellen? Ich bedanke mich im Voraus für Ihre ausführliche Rückantwort.
Thank you. Merci.
It's true that our question was a bit long-winded. However, the answer would be rather concise.
Sie hatte eine Frage zum Pflanzenschutzmittel Folpet. Frau Lucet, Sie werfen uns vor, 50 Produkte, die angeblich krebserregend sind, nach Frankreich zu verkaufen. Als weltweit agierendes Forschungsunternehmen nehmen wir unseren Auftrag sehr ernst. Wir verbessern mit unseren Produkten in der Tat das Leben der Menschen. Ohne die von Ihnen genannte Liste zu kennen, kann ich doch sagen, dass Bayer weltweit ausschließlich Produkte vertreibt, die umfangreich geprüft und für Mensch und Umwelt sicher sind.
Bayer. Science for a better life.
Science for a better life. Is that so? Today, according to our calculations, each year in France, Bayer sells 5,600 tons of pesticides classed as likely carcinogens, toxic to unborn fetuses, or hormone disruptors. Is Bayer going to stop selling these toxic compounds? 3 months after our request for an interview, the company remains silent. Not a single email, telephone call, not even a letter. We are getting impatient. But wait, the brand is holding a conference at a luxury hotel in Paris. The event draws to a close, and we slip into the conference room to meet the global director of Bayer Pesticides and Seeds Division, Liam Condon.
Mr. Condon? Hi. Hey. How are you? I'm Martin Boudin. I'm a French reporter working for the French National TV. Yeah. We're trying to get in touch with you and Bayer about this list. It's the 50 product list sold by Bayer in France, which are known to be carcinogenic or neurotoxic or even toxic for the fetus. And so I just wanted to have your point of view about this product because they're really dangerous, especially for children. So I wanted to know what you thought about that. 50 products, 33 millions.
Every product depends on how it's used. I mean, alcohol can be very dangerous depending on the dose.
This kind of thing, yes.
On peut se déplacer à l'extérieur. Je pense que c'est pas le bon endroit pour discuter ici. Est-ce qu'on peut continuer la discussion à l'extérieur?
J'ai fini dans 2 secondes.
Oui, mais ça vous
dérange pas.
Là, vous allez comprendre qu'il y a...
Non, mais il va juste me répondre. Il était sur le point de me répondre. You're a responsible company. Bayer could say, for instance, well, let's try to avoid selling products that we know are carcinogenic, mutagenic, neurotoxic, or toxic for the fetus. You could say that. You could stand for it. Why not?
Well, what is the point if there's no real risk? We got to look at what's the problem that we are trying to solve. And if you're using a dose that doesn't have a carcinogenic risk, then there shouldn't be an issue.
Okay, so if these products, for instance, are being withdrawn from the markets until the last of the year, what will you say? What will you say about these products? Would you say that they were finally dangerous?
Well,
you know what I mean?
I don't know what the reason would be for them to be withdrawn.
Merci, Monsieur Condon. Thank you. Merci.
Why would these products be withdrawn, Mr. Condon? Maybe due to their toxicity. In France, since 1987, 680 of Bayer's pesticides have been banned from the market, notably because of their hazardousness. In the rankings of withdrawn products, Bayer is by far the winner, way ahead of its competitors. They really are the champions. And now listen closely. What we discovered a few months after our investigation began alarmed us. Some pesticides could play a significant role in triggering autism, and autism itself is exploding amongst children across the world. 2 worrying pieces of information in quick succession. It's a lot to take on board. So let's look at things step by step. Is it true that the number of autistic children is increasing? One man might have the answer to our question. Florent Chapelle. He is the voice of Collectif Autisme, which brings together over 400,000 families.
Voilà. Les repas, on les met où? Là? Bah non, à midi.
But first and foremost, he is the father of Galad, who was diagnosed as severely autistic at just 3 years old. Florent Chapelle fights for his son to be able to have the normal life of a 10-year-old boy. This morning, they are preparing this week's timetable together.
Et c'est qui l'orthophonie? Elle s'appelle comment ton éducatrice? Ouais, d'accord.
Galad goes to elementary school accompanied by an educational assistant.
D'accord, Galad, champion.
Florent Chapelle has investigated the evolution of the number of cases of child autism in the world.
Alors en fait, tous les chiffres concordent. Alors aujourd'hui aux États-Unis, Corée du Sud, au Canada, au Québec, en Suède ou ailleurs, c'est toujours la même tendance.
C'est-à-dire
ça monte de manière quasi exponentielle. Aujourd'hui aux États-Unis, une naissance d'enfants autistes sur 68.
D'accord.
Donc on est passé aux États-Unis de 1 sur 100 il y a 5 ans à 1 sur 68.
We found it hard to believe these figures, but they are real. In the United States, they are seeing an explosive growth in autism. The highly official CDC, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, is blunt. 1 in every 68 children is affected by an autism spectrum disorder.
La pandémie est mondiale. Cette année, le nombre de cas d'autistes diagnostiqués chez les enfants sera supérieur au diagnostic de diabète, de cancer et de sida additionnés. Voilà, c'est ça la réalité. C'est hallucinant.
And how can this upward trend in other Western countries be explained? By better methods of diagnosis? Of course, but not that alone. That very day in Brussels, we would uncover another explanation. The increase in autism amongst children could also be linked to our chemical environment, and one insecticide in particular. The Endocrine Society, an organization that unites 17,000 scientists from across the world, is presenting the findings of its latest study. It is a unique event that is broadcast to the United States and Europe. The researchers are today warning about the effect of chemical pollutants on children's brains, and of autism in particular.
So we produced a study that demonstrates that two chemicals produce autistic-like behaviors in an animal model of autism. These are extremely important implications.
We have all of the mothers behind us when we say we must protect the next generation's brains.
Chemical products are responsible for autism? Before he leaves to return to Harvard, we corner this research scientist to find out more.
Right now, we have a total of 12 chemicals on the list where we are convinced that those chemicals actually harm children in regard to their brain development. We have also added some pesticides like chlorpyrifos.
What?
Chlorpyrifos.
Chlorpyrifos is an insecticide that is widely used, particularly in the United States. To understand the effects of this chemical product on autism, we must head to California. In this state, by law, farmers have to declare what pesticides they spray per square kilometer, which gives this map that the public have access to. The red areas are those where pesticide usage is the most highly concentrated. So why don't we pay a visit to these places where the chlorpyrifos is used the most? Like here, in Tulare County. Orange and lemon trees jostle each other over the horizon. The region is the country's second largest citrus fruit producer. To maintain its position, they don't skimp on chlorpyrifos, the neurotoxic that kills insects. 95 tons of pure substance are applied each year. The inhabitants, mainly Mexican immigrants, live right next to the plantations. And according to them, it's the children who are paying the price. Over 10 years here, there has been a 6-fold increase in the number of children with autism. Claudia Angulo and her children are one of the families affected by this phenomenon. Her son, Isaac, has been diagnosed as mildly autistic. Isaac's apparent calm is down to his medications that regulate his hyperactivity. If he doesn't take them, the little boy changes drastically.
I get mad really easily.
Really? And
like if they just say something about me, I just get mad.
Oh, y le da mucha ansiedad, se muerde la camiseta todo el día.
You've seen him like this with some kind of crisis?
These diapers is all running around crazy.
Claudia Angulo is convinced that chlorpyrifos is responsible for her son's autism.
Pues sí, yo llegué a esa conclusión cuando empecé a hablar con mis compañeras de trabajo. Le digo, fuimos 8 embarazadas y 6 con niños de ADHD, pero de todas maneras nos llega a todos. Y aunque estemos adentro de la casa, como ahorita, mire, estamos aquí, ahorita no huele porque no han rociado. Pero en tiempos que rocían, prende uno el aire acondicionado y todo el aire que jala de afuera hacia acá, aunque estemos adentro, estamos respirando todo eso.
And what role does chlorpyrifos have in his pathology? We take a sample of Isaac's hair for analysis. The results are conclusive. 31.94 picograms of chlorpyrifos, well above the detection limits. But it's impossible to make the formal link between the compound and his autism. However, a few kilometers away, one mother of an autistic child has the evidence in her possession.
Nice to meet you. This is Nathan.
Hey, Nathan. Nice to meet you.
This is Martin.
Nathan is severely autistic, which is the highest degree of the pathology. As far as his mother knows, it's the first case of autism within the Sankus family.
It's like Monterey. There's a lot of grapes do come out of here.
They live right in the middle of the area where chlorpyrifos is applied.
Somewhere. There it is. This could be the reason why. My child was in utero and was probably, you know, I probably ingested or like inhaled some of this stuff, and what, you know, it's not personal use. It's not his choice, you know, certainly not my choice either. So I don't think he will ever be able to live independently. And he's so sweet, you know, and he's just, it's just not, yeah. Yeah.
The touch, the finger touch changes.
So anyway.
Get the way he wants, but I can't either.
To find the causes of his autism, Renee is making her son participate in one of the world's largest studies on the subject. 1,000 autistic children are being monitored across California. The prestigious UC Davis University is piloting this research. Irva Hertz-Picciotto is an environmental epidemiologist.
Yeah, all of this is autism.
For 15 years, she has been compiling all of the neurological tests, blood analysis, and urine samples of these 1,000 children. Recently, she has superimposed the map of the neurotoxic pesticide spray zones with the addresses of the autistic children's mothers when they were pregnant. Her conclusions confirm the family's suspicions.
We found that that the cases were much more likely to have lived within a buffer of, you know, somewhere between 1 1/4 and 1 3/4 miles, so a little bit more than 2 kilometers from these applications. And, you know, it was specifically for chlorpyrifos actually had the highest elevation in risk. So somewhere closer to 3-fold more likely to have been used near the homes when the child was a fetus.
The chlorpyrifos industry wants to hide this truth at all costs.
Could you type in chlorpyrifos info and click?
The first site that comes up is this one, chlorpyrifos.com.
I'll let you read this.
The weight of the evidence continues to demonstrate no link between chlorpyrifos and autism, and no data exists to substantiate such a claim. Okay, well, who has... oh, yes, it's Dow AgroSciences, of course.
Dow AgroSciences, the world's leading producer of chlorpyrifos.
It's an interesting thing. The tobacco industry was very organized in attacking the health studies for decades, and they lied about all kinds of things. I think that's what you know, large corporations tend to do. They're protecting their profits. They're protecting their, you know, their investors, their shareholders, and they, you know, the health of people is not the first thing on their mind.
It has to be said that Dow already has a solid reputation in the field. Dow, it is still a relatively unknown name, and yet is the second largest manufacturer of chemical products in the world. During the war in Vietnam, Dow was one of the suppliers of the infamous Agent Orange. It is a highly toxic weed killer which was sprayed in massive quantities over the Vietnamese forests, and it was responsible for many illnesses and birth deformities. Dow was also developing its flagship insecticide at the same time, chlorpyrifos, but this compound also sits in the accused dock.
Dow agricultural chemists have the answer to kill them inexpensively without harm to the crops they infest or to the soil.
In 1995, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency published an investigation into hundreds of cases of accidental chlorpyrifos poisoning. The pesticide was eventually banned from domestic use in the United States. In Europe, too, chlorpyrifos is banned from sale to the public, but it is still widely used in agriculture. We've been trying to contact Dow for 6 months. No answer. We even went to try to find them at their testing facility in California. No one wanted to open the door to us. So we tried our luck at their American factory, which produces the pesticides. Once again, we fell flat on our faces. No one from Dow wanted to answer our questions on the toxic effects of chlorpyrifos, such as autism. Several months later, Dow finally sent us this email. Did you notice? In its email, Dow never provided the findings of these 4,000 studies. For our interview, the multinational directs us to the European pesticide lobby in Brussels. It is here, at the ECPA, the European Crop Protection Association. Smile, you're on camera. With this little camera, the ECPA's communication team will also record the interview. Let's start off with the results of the hair analysis of the children that we've met throughout our investigation.
Parmi les pesticides auxquels ils sont soumis, il y a le chlorpyrifos. Vous le connaissez, vous, très bien, j'imagine.
C'est une des molécules insecticides les plus utilisées dans le monde.
Exactement. Ouais. C'est un des best-sellers de Dow Chemical, qui est un des géants du secteur. On le retrouve, le chlorpyrifos, dans les mèches de cheveux de tous les enfants.
Alors, je dis à ses parents qu'il est toujours préoccupant de retrouver des traces de produits donc dans les cheveux ou dans le corps de ses enfants ou même de soi-même. Mais je dis aussi à ses enfants que ces produits pesticides, tous les produits, et en particulier le chlorpyrifos, sont des produits qui sont régulièrement revus, réévalués par les autorités chargées de l'évaluation.
Est-ce que vous me maintenez ici qu'il n'y a aucun risque pour la santé de ces enfants?
Au niveau que vous m'avez montré, des picogrammes, je pense qu'il n'y a pas de risque pour la... Je peux pas certifier, on ne peut jamais certifier qu'il n'y a pas de risque. On est dans un domaine scientifique.
Mais là, vous n'avez pas rassuré les parents.
Mais attendez, la science évolue, les connaissances évoluent. C'est vrai que ce sujet des pesticides, c'est un sujet qui inquiète.
Qu'est-ce que vous faites de ces 27 études qui ont cherché à savoir s'il y avait un lien entre exposition au chlorpyrifos, sa famille de pesticides, et le développement neurologique des enfants? Tenez, voilà, cette littérature-là, vous l'avez. Et ce qui est très intéressant, c'est que sur ces 27 études, il y en a 26 qui ont montré que ces produits avaient un impact négatif sur le développement cérébral des enfants. Vous savez quel impact négatif le chlorpyrifos peut avoir sur le développement cérébral des enfants?
Vous savez,
Quel impact négatif le chlorpyrifos peut avoir sur le développement cérébral des enfants?
Précisément, non, mais vous allez me l'expliquer.
Alors, il y a résultats au test cognitif moins élevés, déficit de l'attention, test de QI plus faible. Si ça, c'est pas inquiétant, pour le coup, vous nous dites, bah non, a priori, ces enfants ne courent aucun risque. Voilà ce que disent ces 26 études sur 27.
Alors, est-ce que ces enfants sont normaux? Est-ce qu'ils ont un QI normal?
Vous pensez qu'ils ont pris des surdoués?
C'est la question que je pose.
Vous pensez qu'ils ont pris des surdoués, puis qu'à côté, ils ont pris des enfants qui avaient subi une exposition au chlorpyrifos?
Il faut avoir connaissance du détail de ces études.
Monsieur Bocquet, c'est pas sérieux.
Non, mais je suis très sérieux.
Non, mais vous imaginez bien que les chercheurs, ils ont pas pris une cohorte de surdoués, puis à côté, ils ont mis des enfants qui étaient exposés au chlorpyrifos en disant « Ah, ben, ils ont des tests de QI moins élevés. »
Je n'ai pas dit qu'ils ont été surdoués, mais il faut avoir l'ensemble des données pour conclure ce que vous concluez ici.
Et alors, il y a autre chose qui nous a vraiment beaucoup surpris et même inquiété, c'est que plusieurs d'entre elles, de ces recherches, montrent que le chlorpyrifos serait responsable de l'autisme de certains enfants. Est-ce que vous étiez au courant de ça?
L'autisme, non.
Les scientifiques de l'université de UC Davis se sont rendus compte que lorsque les mamans avaient été enceintes dans une zone d'épandage du chlorpyrifos, le risque d'avoir un enfant autiste était multiplié par 3.
Oui. Alors c'est évidemment préoccupant. Effarant, oui, en fonction du degré de signification. Parce que est-ce que c'est significatif?
Significatif, je ne sais pas ce qu'il vous faut. Multiplier par 3, c'est significatif, non?
Ça dépend. Ça dépend de la taille de l'échantillon, etc. Il faut regarder dans l'étude.
Une cohorte de 1000 enfants autistes.
Oui, mais qui étaient autistes au départ. Donc j'imagine qu'il y a d'autres raisons que le chlorpyrifos.
So you're beginning to understand how this lobby works. While independent scientists find that pesticides have negative effects on health, the manufacturers throw doubt on any studies that might challenge them. And never mind that hundreds of scientific researchers across the world have arrived at the same conclusions. In any case, the French and American governments are due to decide this year whether they should ban chlorpyrifos. But in this fight against pesticides, politicians and citizens don't always have the last word. Our investigation takes us to Hawaii, the paradise on Earth. The island of surfing, fajinis, and flower neck garlands. In reality, the power of the chemical industry here has completely won out over democracy, at the children's peril. To understand all this, we need to take to the skies. We fly over Kauai, the oldest island of the Hawaii archipelago. The island has one distinctive feature. The world's biggest agrochemical companies have all taken up residence here. Because the climate is ideal, up to 4 harvests per year. Dow, DuPont, Syngenta, BASF, they are all here, a few hundred meters away from each other. Monsanto is just opposite, on the neighboring island. In these fields, the firms test their future products. They are developing tomorrow's seeds. It's the largest open-air laboratory for GMOs in the world. 6,000 hectares of testing. And to ensure that nothing impedes these trials, these companies use huge quantities of pesticides. The sprayers are everywhere.
I was wondering what kind of pesticide is being used today.
You know what? You're in private property right now. You're not supposed to be in here. Yeah, go over there.
All right, thanks.
It was worth a try. The workers here have their lips tightly sealed, but documents talk. Like this one we have got our hands on, an internal document from DuPont, one of the giants of chemical products. In it, we find the number of chemical applications carried out by the multinational. In total, over 2,500 per year, which makes 7 per day on average, much higher than the rest of the country. And that's just DuPont alone. The inhabitants, in particular the children, suffer the consequences of this massive usage of pesticides. These clouds of red dust are at issue. They are full of pesticides and swirl about according to the wind, traveling from fields all the way to homes. Doctors on the island have rung the alarm bells. 50 of them have signed an appeal on the worrying number of birth deformities. Like Dr. Chatkupt, an obstetrician.
It's really nice of you for having us here. How long have you been working here?
11 years, since 2004. I used to work in much bigger hospital before, let's say about 10 or 15 times the delivery of this hospital. I think it looks like it was higher than what my experience was. Our population here probably have much higher incidence, about 10 times of the national rate.
Are you worried about this chemical exposure?
I do. I think we should have somebody to really look into all these numbers, and so we can find something unusual happen. That's what I try to say.
One of the birth defects that is the most commonly found on the island is gastrokesis. These Hawaiian babies are born with their intestines outside their stomachs, requiring a high-risk surgical procedure that can't be carried out on the island. A deformity that is supposed to be very rare. Not here. There have been 4 cases in the past 2 years. Faced with these worrying phenomena, the island's people are taking action. The inhabitants have swapped their surfboards for placards against this industry experimentation. They are calling for a law that obliges the companies to disclose the names of the pesticides used and the quantities they are used in. And above all, the citizens are demanding the creation of buffer zones between these testing fields and schools or hospitals. Nothing revolutionary. At the head of this movement is this gentleman, a county councilman. It is he who put the draft bill before the island's council.
This is the council chambers. This is where all the official hearings are held. This is where Bill 2491 was held here.
At that time, in front of him, in this very room, hundreds of witnesses went into the stand, one after the other, to persuade the counselors to pass the law. Nurses.
More babies born with missing ear canals, malformed ears, recurring nosebleeds, cleft palates, asthma, allergies, rashes, hormonal imbalances, more frequent miscarriages.
Hi.
And then there were parents.
My name is Randy Lee Dickinson. I live in Waimea Valley, right below the foothills of Pioneer Cliff, right across the street, right by the river. I'm here on behalf of myself and my family, and I want to speak about my child, who was born with a neurological brain defect.
My son has a condition called Gastrokesis. Basically, the stomach's on the outside. I don't go blame anybody, but I just want to stop the poisoning. Just educate somebody. Something's wrong here.
And then, amongst the witnesses, was this gentleman in the blue polo shirt. He represents the island's pesticides lobby.
I mean, the fundamental difference is between it being law or voluntary, because what happens in here, if it's law, it has ramifications much wider than just Kauai that our companies are interested in as well.
What kind of ramifications are those?
Of being adopted in other counties and states.
So you're concerned that other counties would also want to protect their schools? They were concerned that other communities and states might want to do the same thing. They don't want to set a precedent, and that really is the foundation of this whole thing. Their argument, their pushback, the reason they're pushing so hard on this is they don't want us to set an example.
This local vote became a global issue. So, during months, Monsanto, or Dow Chemical, did everything they could to convince the people of Maui and Kauai to vote no, with terrifying adverts.
Regardless of what you think of GMOs and the seed companies, vote no because the initiative would shut down farms and would put hundreds of people out of work.
The question you have to ask yourself is, before you vote, tell your wife you lost your job. Tell your kids, we cannot take you to the doctor because we need more insurance.
The initiative were to pass, there would be enormous financial implications for the county of Maui.
The pesticide industry put all its weight behind the fight, spending nearly $8 million on these advertising campaigns.
Vote no on the initiative.
In the opposing camp, the people spent $82,807.21. It didn't matter. After months of confrontation, the law was finally passed. But while Hawaii slept, the pesticide lobby was already formulating its counterattack. A few weeks after this historic moment, Syngenta, Dow, DuPont, and BASF filed charges against the island of Kauai. Monsanto did the same with the neighboring island of Maui. These chemical giants contested that the councils didn't have the right to pass such laws, and on what grounds exactly. It would be better to go and ask them in person. At DuPont, nobody wanted to see us, nor at BASF. At Dow, they were not allowed to talk to the press. In front of Monsanto, when we showed our press badge, security cars immediately turned up. It was only Syngenta that would give us a few minutes of its time, off camera. One of the site's managers received us, but he did not want to be filmed. We spoke to him in front of a lovely picture of a Syngenta flower.
One of the questions we have.
Hawaii's heat was starting to make us hallucinate. Listen to what he had to say. It's worth its weight in sunflowers.
So why do you guys decide to sue?
The concern is that if you have to state everything about exactly where you're doing exactly what, then it would make it more likely that people would go into the field and burn it down.
The bill was also about disclosure, the type of pesticide, the quantity of pesticide. How was that a problem?
So part of it is really the administrative burden of having to do that.
Administration burden.
So for us as a large company, again, we can actually do that. But for all of the smaller farmers, if they have to do that and record everything the way that we do, it might actually, we have staff.
Oh, you kind of stand up for these farmers.
Yeah.
In reality, only agricultural companies that use significant quantities of pesticides are affected by this law, not the small farmers. The appeal ruling on the neighboring island of Maui was due to be given the next day. Before going, we decided to adopt some local customs. We picked some flowers right next to the test fields, right where these agrochemical multinationals spray thousands of tons of pesticides. Then we made this beautiful flower neck garland. And we went to the county courthouse. The hearing was due to start in just a few minutes. It's impossible to film inside the building. 2 hours later, and against all expectations, the judges ruled in favor of the multinationals and invalidated the law. The 8 lawyers from the pesticide industry left the courthouse. Marjorie Bronster led the appeal.
From the French National TV. May I offer you this? It's a lei from Maui. Can I offer you?
Yes, you may.
Yeah, okay. How do you? Yeah, I put it like this. Okay. We took the samples from the GM fields down in Maui. These flowers actually are from the GM fields. They might be, full of pesticides though, but I mean, I don't know what you think about that. What do you think of the fact that a democratic process being, challenged by big companies like the one you represent, Dow, Genetics, or even Monsanto? What do you think of that?
Well, I represent a lot of parties in this case. Not all of them are large companies, but I will tell you that the question that the court had to address is who has the authority to regulate. The court is not going to be addressing the question of whether the pesticides are good or bad. It's really a question as to whether the county has the right to step in and regulate in this area. And our position is simply that this is not a county area. It is for the state or the federal government to regulate, and they have been regulating in this area.
Do you think the people from Maui did not vote correctly? I mean, I'm sorry to insist, because we travel a long way to come here. So, do you think the people from Maui did not vote correctly? What do you think?
As I mentioned in court, and as I think the question is, do the voters have the right to regulate in this area? We believe that they do.
What kind of message do you think that sends to the people that believe that votes can change things? What do you think of that?
Certainly, the initiative process is appropriate in certain areas, but we do not believe that this is one of them.
All right. A very last question, Ms. Bronster, and I'll leave you alone. Do you personally believe that the pesticides used on Maui and Kauai in large amounts, some of them are neurotoxic, some of them are carcinogenic, some of them are toxic for the fetus? Do you think this is good for the community? Do you think for the children it's good as well?
As I mentioned, that's not what this case is about, and I'm not going to get into that.
As a human being, what do you think about that?
Meanwhile, in front of the courthouse, the island's inhabitants who had supported the law were still reeling.
In Kauai, the last 3 days?
It's like saying, we don't count. What it's saying is that corporations, have more importance in their world than we, the people, and the children. We go through this belief of having the right to express ourselves and vote, and we have done that, and we were victorious, and then they hold everything up.
In Hawaii, in the great democracy game, the chemical industry is the winner. As our investigation drew to a close, we wondered if our children would end up having to live like this, protected against their own environment. At least there was some good news, though. Amongst the 50 Bayer products classified as dangerous, 6 were withdrawn from the French market. Chlorpyrifos, the pesticide that is neurotoxic to children, is due to be banned in the United States and France in the coming months. In French schools located close to application zones, the installation of anti-pesticide walls, or nets, has begun around the buildings. It's scant protection, but maybe it is the start of a general awareness. Since this documentary has begun, the pesticide industry has turned over 4 million 950,000 euros in sales. In the great toxic game, there is no doubt about it. The winners and the losers are always the same.